Sup everyone, welcome back to another video, and if you are watching this video right now and have not watched part 1 of it, I suggest you go watch that if you are not somebody who is well versed in the game, meaning you don't really know exactly what you're getting yourself into. If you're under AR55 and just got into the game in the last 2 to 3 months or so, you might need some help from the previous video to clarify on some things. This video, we're just going to jump right in to comparisons between Alhaitham and Hu Tao and whatnot. So we're going to talk about their DPS, floors, and ceilings. We're going to talk about rotations. We're going to talk about generally who does more damage, which is what a lot of people want to know, right? And who is better or more worth it, objectively speaking, as well as meta-wise, what is the best course of action for you to go forward with the decision of Alhaitham and Hu Tao. All this stuff accumulated, let's get into right now. Starting with Alhaitham, because he's the banner that is available right now. I believe he has just about a week left before he disappears, and I honestly think that Alhaitham is close to being the perfect character for newer players. Even veteran players can choose to play him. It's just veteran players really have no real purpose to kind of divert away from what they're currently working on just to pick up an Alhaitham, because chances are you're gonna have a Kaching if you're a veteran player, or if you have gotten unlucky, you may have a Tignari, which I know they don't 100% fill the role of Alhaitham. They don't even really challenge him in terms of DPS output, but there's other characters that exist in the game that suit veteran players' needs. But newer players or players who are nearing the end game of Genshin Impact can benefit greatly from Alhaitham. When it comes to the floor, I think this character has one of the highest floors. So if you guys don't understand the concept of floor versus ceiling, ceiling means the maximum damage a character is capable of doing. Floor is basically the minimum amount of damage he can output with low investment, low effort, or just not playing him maybe very optimally. You can say with a 4-star weapon, you can say he's not level 90, maybe level 70, level 60 with Ascension 4, where you at least unlock second talent. So floor means bare minimum, ceiling means maximum. So Alhaitham is a character that has an incredibly high floor, meaning that even at a bare minimum, this character is insane. Granted, you do have to worry about his DPS rotation. What do I mean by that, right? This character functions around mirrors. So now we're here at a different area. You see we have a monster here, so I'm going to kind of show you guys what's up with Alhaitham, right? Alhaitham's elemental skill, essentially, you guys see, generates these 2 mirrors next to him. With that charge attack, I'll generate a new mirror. So you see one disappeared, I'd gain another one. Basically, the entirety of Alhaitham's kit is playing around these 2 mirrors. Now that outro is kind of intimidating, so I'm gonna get the hell out of here. But that was just to demonstrate that when it comes to Alhaitham's playstyle, he really revolves around these mirrors. That's his identity. So for people who want to play a character nonchalantly and not worry about, let's say, passive stacks of such, you're not going to really find Alhaitham to be intuitive, meaning that you're not going to see him as a plug and play character. Even for myself, who's been playing this game for over 2 years, granted, I'm not a very meta driven person and I don't really study theory crafting. It really took me a while to figure out the entirety of his kit. Now, just now you saw that I used the E-charge. I can use a charge attack, but a plunge attack like you saw just now also can get you the 3rd mirror. So playing around charge attack, plunge attack, as well as his burst skill is going to be integral into making Alhaitham work. So for example, when he has no mirrors and he uses a burst, he's going to get full mirrors. But when you have even a mirror and you use the burst is going to eat up that mirror. So it gets pretty complex. The very basic Alhaitham combo that a lot of people use is if you switch into Alhaitham, you go into him with a burst, and then you'll see that he gets 3 mirrors, boom, right here. Then you auto 3, dash, auto 3, and then you charge. With that charge attack, you're gonna be able to get that 3rd mirror back, not because of his elemental skill, but because of his passive talent, number 1. So every 12 seconds, if you plunge or charge attack with Alhaitham, regardless if you use your elemental skill or burst skill, you will get 1 mirror. So the combo with his burst skill, meaning that you start with the burst skill, leading into 3 autos, dash, and then 3 autos, charge. It's almost never a good idea to fully finish Alhaitham's auto attack sequence because it takes so long. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, especially that last hit, it just takes a long time to complete the sequence. So what ends up happening when you play Alhaitham is you're going to find yourself doing short auto attack sequences, and then you're going to dash or charge to cancel and restart your attack sequence. And now mix that in with your charge attack, burst skill, elemental skill, then you find yourself as a completed character being Alhaitham. That's like the bare bones of his DPS rotation. So if any part of that felt like, oh, I don't like that, and that felt too complex for me, I'm not in it for, you know, this kind of rotation to play a character and having to juggle his mirrors. Yes, you do lose DPS if you don't juggle up to 3 mirrors. So that's why when you're running Alhaitham, if you're running him and he drops down to, I mean, 2 mirrors is acceptable. If you drop down to 1 mirror, it just doesn't feel like it's worthwhile to have it on field anymore. Moving on to Hu Tao, this character, I played her for 2 years at this point. To me, it has become very intuitive, but for most people, it is very not intuitive. The difference between Hu Tao and Alhaitham is Hu Tao is a character that, in my honest opinion, she definitely has like a lower floor compared to Alhaitham. Meaning, if you don't invest into her, you're not going to really get much out of her. What I mean by that is, if you don't have her 5-star weapon, you are going to be losing more than if Alhaitham didn't have his 5-star weapon. Hence being why I kept saying Alhaitham is the better choice for newer players or players who have limited resource right now. Because yes, you can get away with 4-star weapons for Hu Tao. Of course, every character can get away with 4-star weapons, but the difference between Hu Tao's second best weapon and Hu Tao's best in slot weapon is larger than Alhaitham's second best in slot and his best in slot, if that makes any sense. Also, when it comes to Hu Tao's DPS, she's heavily reliant on Hydro characters, specifically 2 Hydro units being Xingqiu and Yelan. It is currently incredibly difficult to find replacements to these 2 characters to make Hu Tao work. Sure, you can remove one of them and bring in someone like Albedo, and then you can have double Geo with Albedo Zhongli. That's Hu Tao's previously best in slot team, meaning Hu Tao, Xingqiu, Albedo, Zhongli. Now, if you people say like, well, I don't have Zhongli, I mean, there's plenty of shielders in the game that can fill in for Zhongli, being Layla, being Noelle, being even Toma at this point can all be great options to facilitate a shielding position for Hu Tao. Now, my point here is that Hu Tao definitely feels like a much more nitpicky character as opposed to Alhaitham. Her requirements for success is more complex than Alhaitham. So then you might be wondering, then why are we even comparing these 2 characters? Is it not an obvious answer? Well, to be honest with you guys, if you're a newer player, this might not come as a very obvious decision, because when it comes to advantages, Hu Tao certainly has the higher ceiling in my opinion, but that's also because Hu Tao is being paired with Xingqiu and Yelan, which combine both of their off-field DPSs onto Hu Tao, and also with the reverse vape going on. Yes, given a certain period, Hu Tao will likely out DPS Alhaitham. But then again, it also depends on how many enemies you're fighting. Let's say you're fighting 4 or 5 enemies, Alhaitham likely can do more DPS than Hu Tao because he can actually hit all the enemies. But when it comes to single target damage, Hu Tao usually takes a cake. Now, there's a catch though. Hu Tao doesn't really come online until she's below half health. So you'll see sometimes in Abyss, there are situations where, let's say, Hu Tao doesn't really compete with Alhaitham because it takes Hu Tao 2 elemental infusions before her HP falls below the half health mark. So, to be honest, it just sounds like a lot of disadvantages for Hu Tao, but here are some of the pros when it comes to Hu Tao. Okay, Hu Tao is much more of a rhythmic character, meaning that you can easily end up in a trance when playing this character. I'm going to demonstrate basically the only thing that you really need to worry about Hu Tao, which is animation canceling. So let's start with Hu Tao. So this is a dash cancel, this is a dash cancel, that's a dash cancel, this is a jump cancel. So the difference between these 2 animation cancel is really dependent on what you have your Hu Tao at. If you're at C1, dash canceling is going to be a far more superior way of playing her, meaning that you can reposition yourself. You can also have a faster cancel. You have less risk of actually completely canceling your charge attack, which is a huge DPS loss. Jump cancel, which is this one where you're just charging out and jumping, this one actually ends up canceling your charge attack very often. If let's like that, if I do it like that, then you end up canceling your charge attack. Most people who have C0 Hu Tao heavily relies on jump canceling because that is essentially the only way you can play her without completely depleting your stamina bar. If you deplete your stamina bar while she's still in fusion, you can't even charge attack at C0. So no matter what, you have to make sure she has enough stamina to finish her entire elemental infusion. if you have her as C1, her charge attacks no longer require stamina to use. That's the biggest difference. Even if you are at 0 stamina, you can still charge attack. So let's say in the worst case scenario, let's just deplete all our stamina here. Yes, I do have Hu Tao at C1. Okay, so I'm out here, but I can still charge attack and use jump cancel. So that's an advantage with Hu Tao C1 is even if you're put into a situation where you're completely out of stamina, let's say you were dodging for a really long time, or you already used dashes on another character, even then you can still get away with jump canceling. However, you don't really use jump canceling as often once you get to C1. So now moving on, right? Who does more damage? Period. Who does more damage? I find that in an environment that Hoyoverse is currently cultivating for Genshin Impact, Alhaitham's gonna have a much easier time dealing more damage. Now granted, Spiral Abyss does tend to have less and less enemies in it, but for the most part, Hoyoverse still like to put at least 2 to 3 mobs in these chambers. So Alhaitham is actually perfect for these kind of Abyss runs. It just falls right into his wheelhouse with his mirror stacking. Hu Tao really is more of, I would say, a specialized unit in Genshin nowadays. I have relied on Hu Tao almost every single Abyss iteration. She is incredibly consistent. I mentioned this in the past. However, as how Genshin has developed and evolved, it just comes to show that Alhaitham-esque teams are just going to be better and better as time goes on because his reaction is so solid and well designed. Not saying Vaporize is bad, but Hu Tao's playstyle pretty much makes her a boss killer. She's designed for a 1v1 fight, and she can dispose of the enemy incredibly efficiently. Alhaitham can do the same as well as deal with multiple enemies. Now, Alhaitham is not necessarily designed for huge waves of monsters, like 10 plus monsters per wave with like 3 waves. He could if you can group the enemies, but there are just way better teams. I've mentioned this in the past as well. However, for people who are looking for a strong DPS team comp to build around, my say is Alhaitham is going to be a better choice overall. And I do feel that for the vast majority of people, if you're playing the game on mobile, Hu Tao can be a really annoying character to play around because you have one finger to charge attack, and then you also have to use the same finger to either dash cancel or jump cancel. It is incredibly frustrating if you are playing on mobile and trying to maximize Hu Tao's potential. Now, for people who are used to it, of course it's not a problem. If you love Hu Tao, you love Hu Tao. But Alhaitham don't have those kind of issues. He can tap attack 3 times and then dash, tap attack 3 times and then charge attack, right? It's not as complex. Alhaitham's difficulty comes from needing to memorize his attack sequence, whereas Hu Tao's difficulty comes from muscle memory. You essentially have to force your body to remember the rhythm that she attacks in. Also, depending on your ping, that rhythm may shift. Let's say you go to a friend's house and you want to play some Genshin, and suddenly your friend has higher ping, and now your body is basically memorized to the wrong presses of the buttons, and you're going to have to adjust that to the ping that you're playing on. Trust me, Hu Tao is definitely more of a hassle character, but if you want that specialized boss killer, Hu Tao is definitely going to be one of the best in the game. She's not as heavily utilized as some of the other meta characters. In fact, she's consistent, but she's always hovered around like a 30-40% usage rate. Never really higher than that. Better than most characters, but not really up there with some of the best characters in the game. Okay, so that's all I gotta say for these 2 characters. I hope by the end of these 2 videos, you now know how to play Alhaitham, you now know how to play Hu Tao, you know both their strength, rotations, DPS, right? You know who has a higher ceiling, you know who specializes in what, and going forward, who is likely going to stay on top and more consistent. For people who are still confused, I leave you with this. Alhaitham is like a more complex version of Keqing, who utilizes both elemental skill and burst skill to cycle through flawless rotations of skill and burst to output damage. Hu Tao is more like Yoimiya, someone who heavily relies on their elemental infusion to synergize with a powerful 2x reaction through reverse vape with hydro units and needing a shielder to make sure you never get interrupted. Heavily specialized in single target damage and has a burst skill that you could really neglect from their kit. I'm not saying it's not important, I'm just saying it's not as important as someone like Alhaitham. Hence, you don't really have to worry about sequencing as much. You have to worry about mechanics more, and everything else comes second. Good luck to you guys who are summoning. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment down below. I know this video likely felt very overwhelming or all over the place, but I'm always here to answer questions if you have any, as well as DM me in Discord. Till next time, just stay safe. Peace, bye.